Awesome. Okay, well, before we move on, I just want to announce we're at, let's see, up over $63,000 for Unstoppable right now. That's so good, but we can get that higher, can't we?
200.
Donate. All right. Yeah, 200. So we got a ways to go. I'm going to ask everyone to please turn over to page 159, 159 in your book. That's page 159. It says "Let Go of the Past" on top. And now there's another topic, as Bob alluded to, that we want to insert here. And at this point in the seminar, you probably do have an idea about something big and beautiful that you want. And if you're really entertaining that idea, it's probably scaring you a little or a lot. So we're going to turn this over to an expert who will explain why and how to push through that fear. Please welcome back the president and CEO of the Proctor Gallagher Institute, Sandy Gallagher.
Thank you, Tommy. Hello, everyone. Okay, well, we're going to get into something pretty interesting here. And as I was preparing this lesson, I was thinking about you and how you might be feeling right about now, especially those of you where this is your first event or maybe your second event. Because I remember back in 2006 when I went to my first seminar, and I mean, my mind was spinning. It was totally spinning. And I remember at the end of the seminar, I made a decision that I was going to do some things that seemed like a real big stretch to me. And so I thought, well, how the heck am I going to get from here, where I am now, to where I want to go? And so I knew I had to study. And so I bought every program that they were selling at the back of the room. And I got in. I signed up to be a consultant of the company. I signed up for the year-long coaching program. I mean, I signed up for everything. And then I got in the car and I called my sister, Kathy, and I said, hey, let's go for a road trip. And she said, okay. So I pick her up and we go for a road trip to my condo in Sun Valley, Idaho. And I had the Born Rich audios playing the entire time. And so it's about a 9 or 10 hour drive. And I'm listening to Born Rich the entire way. and and Kathy's in there, and every once in a while she'd say, hey, do you want to listen to some music? I'm like, no, this is so good. And I'm listening to it the whole way, and I'm just like, my mind is, this is coming right off the 3-day seminar, and my mind was just going crazy. And so then we get to Sun Valley, we get in the condo, and Kathy's like, hey, can we go out and get some dinner and maybe go hear some music or something? And I'm like, no, guess what? I've got DVDs of the Born Rich program. And she's like, oh my gosh. So then we sat there, and for whatever, I think it was 2 or 3 days we were there, but we watched the videos the whole time. And I mean, my mind was on fire. And then we drove back the 9 or 10 hours listening to the audio the entire way. And I remember very vividly that at the end of that road trip, I was so excited and so inspired and just, on fire. But at the same time, I was absolutely terrified, because I was like, I felt like I was sort of, on the edge of a cliff, and I was sort of teetering back and forth. I didn't want to go backwards. I didn't want to go back to the way I had thought about things before, but I had no idea on how to go forward. And so I started just studying all the more. And terror barrier is one of the most powerful lessons. It's one of the most enlightening lessons, and it's something you really need to understand if you are going to get to the point where you really want to be in your life. And so I want you to really think about what we're studying right now, okay? Because you'll use this and it'll make a huge difference. Now look here, we teach about the ABCs of goals. And A-type goal, that's where you already know how to do it. There's no inspiration, there's no growth. It's not the kind of goal you want to be going after if you want big change in your life. And so then you got the B-type goal, and this is where you get kind of maybe come to a seminar like this and you get inspired and you're like, okay, if I do this and if I do that and I change things up a little bit, I can achieve this goal. And you pick that goal, but it's not what you truly want. It's not your heart's desire. It's just your thinking of how you can stretch things a little bit. But you know what? The B type goal is probably worse than the A in some senses, because you think you're going for it, but there's no inspiration because you're not really in love with the goal. And here's the other thing is everyone in your life, it's enough of a change that you're kind of alienating them, and so you don't have your support system because you're changing, and the people around you, they don't want you to change them, but you are by changing yourself. You see, so it's a real catch 22 there. So a B type goal is not the type of goal you want to go for. What you want to go for is what we call a C type goal. And that's what you really, really, really want to do. And you don't know how, but you don't have to know how. All you have to know is that you will. But this requires a lot of stretching on your part. You got to really, really stretch. You got to go into the unknown. Look at the space there that the A goal takes up and the space that the B goal takes up versus the space that the C goal takes up on that slide. There's all that space out there. It's just waiting for you to grab it. What is it that you want? You got to really, really, really stretch and latch on to your goal. And don't let fear stop you. You really don't have to know how. I promise. Now, if you latch onto your goal, in order to get there, you're going to have to go through 4 stages of growth. And these lead to understanding and freedom. And it's very powerful. The first stage is bondage, and we're going to go into what that means. But basically, you've got your X type conditioning, the conditioning you've had for a long time, and you've got your X type behavior. You're taking X type actions, you're entertaining X type thoughts, and voila, you're getting X type results. Now, most people are in bondage. And that's pretty interesting because you could look at some people that are extremely, in your mind, successful. You know, they might look extremely successful, but they may be, but if they're doing the same thing over and over and over, thinking the same way over and over and over, they're in bondage. I was in bondage when I was a lawyer. I was doing all kinds of fascinating transactions, but I could do them in my sleep at that point. And so that is bondage. Now, to continue to grow, you've got to move out of that stage and move into the stage of reason. And this is where you start to entertain a why idea. A why idea is just a big idea that's different than the way you're conditioned to think. Okay? And so you start to entertain this idea, but you're only doing it in your conscious mind. And guess what? You're taking X type actions and you're getting X type results. Now, even fewer people get past that stage. I mean, really, a few percentage of the population get past that stage. So what happens when you get past that stage is you go into the stage of terror barrier, and that's when it starts to get really interesting, and we're going to get into that. And the final stage that, again, just a few get through to, is where you go through that terror barrier and you are in the stage of freedom. This is what we're all searching for, is freedom. Now, let's go back here and let's look in this in a little more detail. Okay, so here you are. Let's say you're really making it happen in your life, but it's all in harmony with your X type conditioning. And so what happens is it's kind of like a circle of ignorance. I love how Troward puts it. In the Hidden Power, in the essay on entering into the spirit of it, he says we habitually look at the mechanical side of things by preference to any other. Everything is done mechanically, from the carving on a piece of furniture to the arrangement of the social system. It's the mechanism that must be considered first, and the spirit has to be fitted to the mechanical exigencies. Now, bear with me here because some of his wording is pretty deep, but there's a really, really important point here. He says we enter into the mechanism of it instead of into the spirit of it, and so limit the spirit and refuse to let it have its own way. And then, as a consequence, we get entirely mechanical action, and we complete our circle of ignorance by supposing this is the only sort of action there is. So I want you to think about that. let's say you're in this stage of bondage and you've got X type conditioning. That's in your subconscious mind. That's your paradigm. That's the emotional part of your personality. Now, in your conscious mind, you're going to only be entertaining X type ideas. There are a gazillion ideas that are floating into your mind, but you're going to be filtering out all the ones that aren't in harmony with your X type conditioning at this stage of awareness. And so it's that circle of ignorance. You look outside and you say, well, this is this and that is that, and therefore this is the only way to do it. But what we're saying is you got to get past this stage and start entertaining new ideas that your level of awareness hasn't opened up to before. And so instead of just letting the X type ideas come into your conscious mind and impress them on your subconscious mind and keep reinforcing the X type conditioning, you got to go past that stage if you want to change the results in your life. And so you get out of this circle of ignorance. You say, okay, I am going to expand my consciousness. And you go on to the next stage, stage two of growth. And at this stage, we're entering into the stage of reason. You're taking a why idea. You've got some big, beautiful idea that you absolutely love. And you say, okay, I'm going to think about doing this. And you start playing around with it in your conscious mind. And you start to tap into your intellectual faculties, your imagination. And so you're thinking, well, I could do this, I could do that. Um, and so I very clearly remember being in this stage for quite a while. I kept playing around with the idea. I was moving forward and creating the program, thinking into results with Bob. And I, was volunteering with the company, helping any way I could. And I was daydreaming about being partners with Bob and just being all in this industry and leaving the law. And I thought about that. I'd play around with it, but I was still running my practice from 2006 until mid 2009. I'm still running my law practice. I'm still doing bank mergers and acquisitions, and I would go to the office, and at the time I was in downtown Seattle, and I'd go up to the high rise, and I'd be working on my deals, but I'd be looking out the window and sort of daydreaming about what it could be like if I wasn't doing the law. And I remember one day, well, actually, two things that were funny. One was funny and the other not so much. But I remember thinking, okay, I want to leave the law, but what would my dad think? And I remember saying to Bob one day, I wonder what my dad will think when I tell him I'm going to leave the law. And he looks at me like, what? Like, why would you even care what your dad, why do you care what your dad thinks? And I'm like, and he goes, how old are you? And I'm like, why is he asking me how old I am? Like, I didn't get it. I'm sure you get it already. But, and I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, how old are you? And all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, I'm in my 40s and I'm wondering, was I that old? Wow. Anyway, I'm in my 40s and I'm wondering, what is my dad going to think? You know? I mean, why would that be relevant at that stage of my life? And so that was a real eye opener for me. And then one day I was CEO of the company working with Bob. This was in May of 2009. And he comes to me and goes, what are you doing? And he's staring me in the eye like he can only do. And he's like, what are you doing? Are you in or you out? And I was like, whoa. And I knew I had to make a choice. It was time for me to make a choice. Well, it was way past time for me to make a choice. It wasn't going to work for me to keep running the law practice and keep doing everything I'm doing and running these companies. And so I had drafted a letter and to go to my clients and colleagues. But I kept thinking about sending it, but I hadn't sent it. And so this was a stage when Thinking into Results was finished, the program Bob and I were creating. We had released it the month before in April of 2009. And so there was a lesson in there on the terror barrier that I would go back to over and over and over. And I kept studying this over and over. And I knew, okay, here's where I am. I'm stuck. I'm at this stage of reason. I've got the why idea, but I'm not taking action because it's just in my conscious mind. I'm just playing around with the idea in my conscious mind. I have not done the work to get it into the emotional part of my mind. So I'm like, okay, I need to really do this and impress it over and over and over and really get emotionally involved with this idea. This isn't just some daydream. I'm going to do this. I am going to do this. This is what I set out to do. This is what I wanted, and I'm going to do it. So I kept doing what you got to do, which is impress the idea on your subconscious mind. Now, I want you to look really closely at this and look at what happens when you do this. Okay, so I impressed the why idea over. I really got emotionally involved with this. I saw myself doing this. I was living from that place, and boom, you hit that terror barrier, and worry and doubt and fear and anxiety, it just hits you. It's like, oh, your central nervous system, it's just like short circuiting, and all you want to do is just run back to safety, run back to the comfort zone. I mean, and this is real. This is real. And I remember many times getting that email queued up, and I'm ready to send it. I had it set up to go to over 2,000 people, clients, colleagues, my dad. And I kept backing down. I kept hitting that terror barrier. And finally, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't just get stuck here. Most people get stuck here. If they get this far, they get up to that terror barrier, they go flying back to safety, and they do it over and over. And eventually, they're like, oh, it's not so bad here. And I remember at times thinking that it's not so bad practicing law. But no, I had made a decision I was going to do this. So you've got to understand what the terror barrier is. You've got to understand what's going on here. Like, why is this such a scary place to come to? And it's because the X and Y type conditioning, they don't mix. It's like oil and water, they do not mix. And it's a very chaotic vibration that affects you in a very real way. I mean, I I would like, if you're really involved in your C type goal right now and you're hitting the terror barrier, you might be experiencing a headache, or you're feeling nauseous, or you're just feeling chaos and the anxiety. That's natural. That is coming up against the terror barrier. That's the paradigm battling with the dream, and you cannot let the paradigm win. And so, most people, though, they just keep getting knocked back to safety. And, every time you go back there and you don't go through that terror barrier, you don't do what you really want to do, it just knocks you down on the ladder of self-esteem. It's a horrible way to feel. But here's what you got to get. You got to go to the next stage with the understanding that, I love how Joseph Campbell puts it. He just is so good, and he says the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Think about that. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. I remember when I saw Bob teaching, and every time I saw him teaching, I was so fascinated. I thought he was so amazing. But at the same, and then I would sort of start to think, oh, I want to do that. And I would just hit this terror barrier of, oh my gosh, I mean, how could I do that? He's just so good. It's so fascinating. And how could I do that? But I would keep hearing this phrase that Joseph Campbell says: the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. I thought, wow, I'm hitting that terror barrier because it's something I want so badly. Like, I really want it. And when you face the fear, you automatically experience the growth that you're seeking. It's the spiritual part of you that is seeking that growth. This is something you really, really want. This is inspiring you. It's I mean, it's your heart's desire. And so you want to go through to the next stage so that this can be yours. You have to go through this, and when you're understanding, grasp what's going on here and how you've got to go through this. You've got to go through this, and you want what you want so badly, you will go through it. That's what we're after. That is freedom. See, we're up here against terror barrier. We understand. So we're going to impress that why idea. We're getting emotionally involved. We hit the terror barrier, we go right through it. And so we've got the why idea, we've impressed it on the subconscious mind. Now we got to keep impressing it over and over because it's still mixed energy. It's still XY energy. And we're mixing it until finally we've changed our paradigm. We've got a new paradigm. Now it's a Y type paradigm. And guess what we have to do at that point? We got to set a bigger and a better goal. But we've tasted freedom. We've tasted it and we love it because it's the essence of who we are. Spirit wants that freedom and expansion. Now, I want you to ask yourself, what stage are you at? What stage do you really think you're at right now? Now, you may have gone through this before and had some big changes in your life, and then maybe quit growing, quit studying, quit working on yourself. So, what stage are you right now? That's the only thing that's really important. And I want to just back this up a little bit for a second. And I want to go back here, and you're right here. I want you to just imagine this is where you are. So you've got the why idea, you're impressing it, boom, you hit the terror barrier. You're feeling the worry and the fear and the anxiety, and you're everything in you. You know, we talked in the visioneering about mental hurry. Hurry is fear and consequently destructive. Well, you're experiencing that. I mean, it's like sometimes you get that mental hurry and you're standing still, but you feel like your legs are just running in place and you just want to get out of there. It's real. Are you going to go running back or are you going to go through the terror barrier? When I was in Delray Beach, Florida, and I was at that seminar the day after Bob said, here's the deal. This is the deal if you want to do this program. And he looks at me and says, do we have a deal? We have a deal, don't we? And I nodded my head yes, because I had held that image. I had got emotionally involved with it, and I was to just nod my head yes, but then all hell broke loose inside. And I literally probably shook for a year because that conditioning was so strong. But I knew I was going to do it. I had made a decision I was going to do it. And when I had come up to this stage of the terror barrier and I had kept coming back and I had that letter, but no, I hadn't sent it yet. I thought, okay, it's do or die. I got to do this. I'm going to call Bob and I'm going to get some help on this. And so I called him up and I said, Bob, I I've queued this letter up so many times, I just can't send it. And he goes, hit send. He said, you got to go through this. And I was thinking about what Joseph Campbell said. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And I had my finger right on the send button. And I got Bob on the phone, and he's like, hit send, jump. You'll develop wings along the way. And he boomed it in my ear, and boom, I hit send, and I went through, and I literally screamed. I probably broke his eardrum, and I screamed like ah, and I went and I looked in my email, in my outbox, in my email. Um, I had heard that when the email goes out, but I thought I'm going to check it anyway and see if maybe it got hung up in the outbox, and it hadn't. It was in the sent box. It had gone out, and I was freaking out. And within 24 hours, I had about I think it was 892 emails, a boatload of emails. And I read them, and, they were all along the lines of, I wish I had that kind of goal. I wish I had that kind of passion. I wish I had the courage to do something like that, and on and on. And there were three that I will never forget. Um, Three of them where they said basically the same thing, which was, I would love to do something like that, but I'm going to sit here until the day I die. And I'll never forget that. It just made me so sad to see that. But don't be in that boat. Go through that terror barrier. Do what you want to do. When you understand this, you can move through it. I want to show a clip right now, and then I'll come back on for a minute. But this is a great little video, and it really really says what we're talking about here. Hey, Tommy, you want to play that video?
Skydiving is a really interesting confront with fear. I gotta stand up. I'm sorry, I gotta stand up. You go out the night before and you take a drink with your friends and somebody says, yeah, we should go skydiving tomorrow. And you go, yeah, we'll go skydiving tomorrow. Yeah, yeah, and you go, yeah. And everybody goes, yeah. And you go home by yourself, you're like, Right? You're like, well, I mean, they was drunk too. So then that night you're laying in your bed and you just keep, and you're terrified. You keep imagining over and over again jumping out of an airplane and you can't figure out why you would do that. So you get there and then you have this safety brief and you're standing there and the guys will tell you, well, if the chute doesn't open, what's going to happen is well, why the hell, what could happen? So you get onto the airplane and you're sitting there and you know, it's extra because you're sitting on some dude's lap, some stranger, trying to make small talk. Yeah, man. So you be jumping with people all the time, huh? So you fly and you go up to 14,000 feet and somebody opens the door. And in that moment, you realize you've never been in a freaking airplane with the door open. Terror, 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 terror. And then people start going out of the airplane. And the guy walks you up to the end of the thing, and you're standing and your toes are on the edge, and you're looking out down to death. They say, on 3. 1. 2, and he pushes you on 2 because people grab on 3. And you fall out of the airplane, and in 1 second, you realize that it's the most blissful experience of your life. You're flying. There's zero fear. You realize at the point of maximum danger is the point of minimum fear. The lesson for me was, why were you scared in your bed the night before? What do you need that fear for? Everything up to the stepping out, there's actually no reason to be scared. And then in that moment, all of a sudden, where you should be terrified is the most blissful experience of your life. And God placed the best things in life on the other side of fear.
I love that video. It fits so perfectly. You know, I am so grateful. Probably hitting send with that letter is one of the very top things that I'm so grateful for. And it's worth every bit of anxiety and worry and that you go through to go through that terror barrier. You just got, if you understand, you can do it. And I'll never forget April 1st, 2009. Thinking into results, we had finished it and it was a finished product, all ready to go. And we're doing an event in Alberta, Canada. And I was at the event, Bob was speaking. There were probably 1,000 people in the room in Red Deer, Edmonton, Alberta. And probably about 1,000 people in the room, and Bob's teaching, and then he starts talking about thinking into results. And he's talking about what a great program it is, and that it's available for the first time now. And I started going back in my imagination, thinking back to all the different hurdles and obstacles and terror barriers that I had to go through to get there. And I was just like, I was very emotional. And he's talking about the program, and I was just so grateful. You know, Adler, he says that we should be grateful for the idea that uses us. He says, I'm grateful for the idea that used me. And at that moment, I was just so grateful for the idea of thinking into results that used me. It changed my life in such beautiful ways. And I want to share email exchange with you because I printed it and I laminated it and I look at it often. And you want to do that as you go through these moments where you're going through the terror barrier, and you're so proud of yourself that you did it, you're so grateful that you did it, and something, you get an email, you have a conversation with someone, and it just makes you feel so good. Print it out, laminate it, keep it. And so Bob wrote to me. I was at the airport. I had a 6 a.m. flight. I was flying back to Seattle day after that seminar, and he wrote. I had my BlackBerry, and in pops an email from Bob, and he said, "Sandy, I watched you sitting there as proud as a new mother, as hundreds of people were buying your program. You earn more money in 1 hour than you did an entire year as a lawyer." And this is merely the first in a series of thinking programs, one small step in the direction of greater things you will do, many of which are beyond your wildest dreams. Tell that to your dad. And it was funny because my dad wasn't quite sure what I was doing at that point, but he's very, very proud now, or he was. Um, and then I remember being at the airport and just being, well, I actually had tears in my eyes, and the tears were just streaming down my face. And I wasn't accustomed to that because I was used to being in boardrooms and negotiating deals, and you don't get emotional. It just doesn't go over well. So I wrote back to him and I said, Bob, for some strange reason, I have tears in my eyes. For the longest time, there was absolutely no physical evidence that my dream would manifest, but I did everything I could every day. I was willing to change my thinking and go against the strong current. And now it's just so good. That is so key. Just do everything you can every day. You may not see evidence that it's working, but it is working if you're holding the idea and emotionally involved in it, impressing on your subconscious mind, and taking action in harmony with it. Do everything you can every day and be willing to change your thinking and go against the flow and go through that terror barrier, because it doesn't happen by accident. You make it happen, and it's a beautiful thing. You want what you want. If you're going after your heart's desire, your spirit wants expansion and fuller expression. This is the path to get there. Go through that terror barrier.
Thank you, Sandy. Such a powerful lesson. I can't ever hear that one too much. Peg and Brian, would you guys come on for a couple minutes and let's talk about